Hey there, I'm Tobias and welcome to another edition of Realms Album Quest. Realms Album Quest is a series where I catalogue and discuss all the albums I've listened to over the past week. Last week I listened to 15 different albums, the best of which was the classic self-titled stoner rock record from Kius, otherwise known as Welcome to Sky Valley. This week I listened to just 12 different albums, so let's get straight into them. The first album I listened to this past week was the new collaborative record from More Mother and Mental Jewelry under the name More Jewelry. The record, True Opera, is a short but impactful record which blends noise rock textures with post-punk structures in a way that blows my mind. The album has an incredibly claustrophobic atmosphere which reaches its most potent on the track Working. The noisy guitars and frantic drums feel as though they're closing in around you as you listen, whilst More Mother's chaotic vocals will make you feel like you're being taunted by them. It's records like this that are causing post-punk to become one of my favourite genres in 2020, and True Opera is one of my favourites to do it so far. If you like Daughter's 2018 effort You Won't Get What You Want, give this one a try. Next up on Friday, I listened to the new album from legendary musician, storyteller, singer-songwriter and harmonicist Bob Dylan. Enjoying a career spanning over 60 years at this point, Dylan has already gone down in history as one of the most important musicians in the history of the art. In my opinion, this gives him enough artistic credibility to basically do whatever he wants when it comes to making music, which is why I was surprised to find that he's still churning out these long story-driven folk cuts. It's a bit more of a low-key affair these days, Dylan sounding more like Leonard Cohen as he's aged, but his stories are every bit as compelling on tracks like False Prophet and the 17-minute epic tale Murder Most Foul. Whilst I'm not as captivated as I was by the material he was putting out in the 60s and 70s, I'm still impressed that Bob Dylan hasn't lost his edge in the world of folk music, despite being part of it for over half a century. On the other side of the coin, one of the biggest up-and-comers in the folk scene is the Californian singer-songwriter Phoebe Bridges. Bridges first appeared on my radar after her collaboration last year with Conor Oberst on the record Better Oblivion Community Center, a record which I enjoyed but failed to capture my attention in a lot of places. I'm glad to report that Phoebe Bridges' second solo effort, Punisher, succeeded where Better Oblivion Community Center failed, and Punisher is enjoyable from start to finish, with Bridges channeling her inner Elliott Smith on a lot of tracks, including The Garden, Punisher, and Moonsong. Even though Saviour Complex grew a little monotonous, I immensely enjoyed this album overall and would recommend it to all the folk fans out there. On Sunday, I listened to a classic record from Kate Bush, whose debut album The Kick Inside I covered a few weeks back in a previous video. The album in question this time around was The Dreaming, where Bush truly comes into her own over the course of a record. Bush's eccentricities and bizarre inflections were present on The Kick Inside, but she truly embraces and exaggerates them on this record, including on some of my favourite tracks like There Goes a Tenor and Get Out of My House. Couple that with the fact that the instrumentals, while slightly more pop-driven than the art rock style present on The Kick Inside, are beautiful, and you've got yourself one of Bush's strongest records, arguably even on par with the album generally considered her magnum opus, Hounds of Love. Monday saw me listen to an album that, having been released late last year, recently found its way to streaming platforms. Perhaps best known for being the younger brother of respected grime veteran Skepta, JME is a legend in the grime scene in his own right at this point. Best known for his collaborative single That's Not Me with Skepta, Grime MC is JME's fourth studio album and is by far his best effort to date. The beats go so ridiculously hard on every single track, and with JMA's bars being even more thought-provoking and tongue-in-cheek than ever before, especially on cuts like 96 of My Life, Pricks, and You Watch Me, it's hard not to love this record a little bit. The track Here, featuring on the back end of the record, is perhaps the album's closest thing to a dud, with a stale hook and so-so production, but there's no doubt in my mind that this would have made my top albums of 2019 if I'd heard it back then. On Tuesday, I listened to an R&B album which, whilst fairly modern, is already being heralded as a classic. I'm talking about the debut record from R&B queen Janelle Monae, titled The Arch-Android. The Arch-Android is one of those albums that puts you in a certain kind of bittersweet mood. It's simultaneously upbeat, with several tracks being driven by breakbeats, certainly very unique for the genre, whilst the production choices often evoke a sense of melancholy. This is all topped off with Monae's excellent voice, which sounds great on cuts such as Faster and Come Alive, The War of the Roses. My favourite track on this record is the exquisitely produced Wonderland, which is definitely one of the weirder tracks on the Arch Android, though that suits me down to a T. The only song on here I wasn't keen on was the Of Montreal feature Make the Bus, which felt a little bit too out of place and incorporated too much of Montreal's hypnagogic pop style, to the point it felt more like Janelle Monae was featuring on an Of Montreal record, not the other way around. Nonetheless, the Arch Android was still a solid record which was enjoyable from start to finish over its 68-minute runtime. I also listened to the new full-length project from another icon in the modern R&B scene in the form of Tiana Taylor's third record, simply titled The Album. The Album is a behemoth as far as R&B records are concerned, running for almost 80 minutes. This is a stark contrast to Taylor's last record, the Kanye West-produced KTSE, which ran for just 22 minutes. Whilst at the time I would have liked to hear something slightly more fleshed out from Taylor, a project this long has to have a lot of ideas to justify its length, which unfortunately the album did not. Now don't get me wrong, there are some great tracks on here, such as the Erykah Badu feature titled Low Key, or Shoot It Up featuring Big Sean. But there are at least as many duds on this record, including Mornin' featuring Kalani or Friends. It's a shame because I feel like there is a strong 40-minute record here somewhere, but the record is still swimming in filler. Wednesday morning saw me listening to yet another classic from the lesser known of the two driving forces behind the Velvet Underground's success. Of course, I'm talking about John Cale and his iconic 1973 record Paris 1919. Paris 1919 is one of the more surprising records I listened to this week, especially considering his input as a member of the Velvet Underground. This record serves to highlight the range of John Cale's creative process. From the bright and beautiful Baroque pop of Child's Christmas in Wales, to the more abrasive and upfront Macbeth, to the incredibly low-key Antarctica Starts Here, Cale doesn't put a foot wrong for the duration of the entire record. As a first foray into his solo material, John Cale doesn't disappoint on Paris 1919. I then listened to the new record from Washington-based neo-soul artist Brendan Cook, also known as Starchild and the New Romantic. Forever is the third album from Starchild and the New Romantic, and is the first I've personally listened to, boasting an impressive feature list, including other greats in the modern soul and R&B scene, such as Toro y Moi and Nick Hakim. Forever runs at 10 tracks for a little over 30 minutes. The track list includes a number of great tracks, including the upbeat cut Fall Window, the Toro y Moi featured Tape, and the funky banger Silent Disco featuring Roseheart. The project does tail off somewhat dramatically on the last couple of tracks, but this was still a fairly solid new soul project and makes me excited to see what's next for Starchild and the New Romantic. Following Forever was the new record from German deconstructed club producer Amnesia Scanner titled Tearless, and honestly it's really hard to understand so many people's disdain for this record. I've seen a number of comparisons to artists like 100 gecs or A.G. Cook, but honestly this record doesn't sound like anything those artists have made. The record feels most comparable to something like a Blank Mass record, or perhaps the 2018 album Age Of from legendary producer Oneohtrix Point Never. Whilst Amnesia Scanner doesn't quite have enough ideas to keep Tearless fresh for its entire 30-minute runtime, with AS Labyrinth being one of the more obnoxious tracks I listened to this week, overall I really enjoyed this record and I can't see the part of this record that warrants such harsh criticism. The final album I listened to on Wednesday was the latest record from one of my favourite bands in metal right now, Saudi Arabian outfit Al Namrud. Al Namrud are, in my opinion, one of the most metal bands to ever create music, just because of the context of making metal in Saudi Arabia and the fact that it's largely banned throughout the country. To me, this shows the sheer amount of love and passion the band have for the music they're making. Their 8th record, Walla At, is my favourite from the band so far, with the brutality of every single track coming through in full force like never before. Coupled with the incredibly harsh and abrasive vocals, tracks like Sarah Yezer and Cale Bear Mekayalen are some of the strongest metal tracks of 2020. Metalheads will not want to miss this one. Finally, this morning saw me listen to another classic from New Jersey-based noise pop group Yo La Tengo. Having listened to the album considered to be their magnum opus, I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One, earlier this year, their 1993 effort, Painful, was the object of my attention today. A very low-key affair, Painful is a much shorter record than 1997's I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One, and much less immediate. There are still a lot of gorgeous tracks on here, such as Double Dare and I Was the Fool Beside You for Too Long, but despite being a lot shorter, it failed to capture my attention in quite the same way. I'd still recommend this one to anyone, and I did enjoy the bulk of the tracks. It just took me longer to unpack everything than I Can Hear the Heart Beating as one did. So there we have it. Those are the 12 albums I listened to over the past week. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on these albums if you've listened to or choose to listen to any of them, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like. And until next time, enjoy the records.